A dreamliner soaring through the sky, smooth, effortless, a marvel of modern engineering. In the blink of an eye, the world changes. What was once a quiet ascent, now nothing more than a fleeting memory. The engine's gone, cut off, silent. What could make a pilot, trained, experienced, cut fuel midair? A simple switch, a flick of a hand. But what happened next? Questions, whispers in the wind. And all of them have the same answer. We don't know. The seconds that followed would forever change lives. And with them, the air, the silence, the uncertainty. But who moved the switch? Why did the engines fall silent? The story of Flight 171 is just beginning. It was a clear morning, the sky stretching wide, unbroken, a perfect canvas. The aircraft, a Boeing 787, a symbol of human ingenuity, stood ready. Flight 171, poised for takeoff, its course laid out before it. The engines hummed with quiet assurance. This was a routine flight, or at least, that's what it seemed. Captain Subberwall, with over 15,000 hours of experience, sat in the cockpit. Next to him, First Officer Kunder, with a solid 3,400 hours under his belt. They were no strangers to the skies. The vast, unbroken horizon was just another day's work. They were seasoned professionals, both entrusted with the lives of passengers aboard this state-of-the-art machine. In the quiet hum of the cockpit, their minds were steady, their focus absolute. Little did they know, however, that the calm they felt would soon be shattered. The weight of the aircraft was just right, heavy enough to carry the passengers safely, but light enough for a smooth climb. The weather? Perfect. Visibility stretched for miles. A blue sky that would stay clear all the way to their destination. But even in the serenity of that moment, uncertainty loomed. Just days before, Captain Subberwall had spoken to his family. His words were simple, almost too casual. "I'll be home soon," he said. To them, it was just another flight. They had no way of knowing that it would be his last. The aircraft was ready, the crew was prepared, but the storm was coming, and it would come without warning. In just a few minutes, what seemed like a routine departure would spiral into a catastrophe no one could have predicted. And now, the countdown begins. In December of 2018, the FAA issued a bulletin, a cautionary note, about the fuel control switch on Boeing aircraft. A simple mechanism, a locking feature designed to prevent accidents, was at the center of it. A small lever, meant to ensure that the switches couldn't accidentally move during flight, just a tiny, unassuming part of the aircraft. Yet, the bulletin warned of a potential issue, a disengagement of that lock. A defect, it seemed, that could leave engines vulnerable to an accidental cutoff mid-flight. The bulletin was issued for Boeing's 737 models, yet the FAA didn't specifically recommend any changes for the 787. Air India, like many operators, chose not to inspect their 787s for this problem. The reason? It wasn't mandatory. The warning wasn't enough to force action. Could that one switch, locked incorrectly, have been the weak link? Could such a tiny, overlooked issue be the key to unraveling this tragedy? And so, the question remains, what if the cause was buried in the smallest detail? A fault so subtle, it never even raised suspicion. Experts like those from Al Jazeera and AIB have pointed out that while the switch was involved in previous incidents, it hadn't caused issues on the 787 before. So why now? Why, at this moment, did this small mechanism fail when it mattered most? As the investigation continues, the mystery grows. Was this truly the cause, or just another piece in a puzzle that's far from complete? It begins as any takeoff would. The clock ticks down, the aircraft positioned for departure. A clear day, no clouds in sight, the runway stretching endlessly ahead. It's a routine procedure, one the crew has performed thousands of times before. But this time, the stakes are higher. This time, something will go terribly wrong. At 8 hours, 7 minutes, and 33 seconds, they are cleared for takeoff. The engines roar to life. The aircraft, heavy with passengers and cargo, begins its roll down the runway. The ground slips away beneath them, but this isn't a race. It's a calculated, methodical acceleration. 56 seconds later, they reach V1, the speed at which they must either take off or abort. A critical moment. The aircraft, now locked into its path, enters the phase of no return. V1, the aircraft calls out, a calm confirmation that the decision has been made. It's now or never. No turning back. At 8 hours 8 minutes and 29 seconds, rotation speed is achieved. The pilots, hands steady, guide the aircraft into the air. For a moment, everything is smooth, everything is normal. But then, something begins to change. At 8 hours 8 minutes and 32 seconds, the aircraft is airborne. The wheels lift from the runway, and the first officer, as protocol dictates, begins the climb. But something happens in those next few seconds that no one expected. At 8 hours 8 minutes and 35 seconds, the engines fall silent. The cockpit voice recorder captures the confusion. Why did he cut off? He did not. A second later, the RAT, the ram air turbine, deploys, its mechanical whirring filling the silence. This device, usually a backup, now becomes their last hope, providing hydraulic power when both engines fail. The seconds tick by. Timing is everything. The switches, the fuel cutoff, all fall into place. The engines are starved. The question remains, who moved the switches? Why? As the rat spins, the aircraft's fate hangs by a thread. The calm, methodical procedure has turned to chaos in mere seconds. And now, we ask again, how did it all unravel so quickly? What happened in those moments between takeoff and catastrophe? The investigation continues. The data is there, but the full picture is still missing. The seconds that followed the takeoff were a blur, a fast-forwarded moment in time, too quick to fully understand, yet too crucial to ignore. At 8 hours 8 minutes and 35 seconds, the engines fell silent. The fuel cutoff switches, once in the run position, now slipped into cutoff, just like that. But here's the thing. 1 second separates these movements. 1 second. It's a small gap, yet it feels like a lifetime. Could this have been an accident? Was this an innocent mistake, a fleeting moment of distraction, a slip of the hand? Or was it something far darker, intentional, deliberate, driven by a split-second decision that we still can't comprehend? The cockpit voice recorder captures the exchange that followed, but it raises more questions than answers. Why did he cut off? He did not. The voice is calm, controlled, but the weight of the words echoes through the timeline. Who moved the switches? And why did they move them? Could a trained pilot, with over 15,000 hours of flight time, make such a mistake? Or could it be that, in the heat of the moment, the impossible became inevitable? Experts, including those from the NTSB and Wall Street Journal, have speculated on the possibility of human error. Was it a momentary lapse in concentration, or was something far more complex at play? One thing is certain, this wasn't a random malfunction. The locks on those switches, designed to prevent accidental movement, would have held steady if the switch was properly engaged. But the 1 second gap in the timeline suggests something far more deliberate. A question hangs in the air. Did a pilot's hand move the switch knowingly, or did the system betray him? As we dig deeper into the timeline, each second, each movement becomes more crucial. What did the pilots know? What did they suspect? What caused them to respond the way they did? Answers are still buried in the data. But the truth, whether accidental or intentional, remains just beyond our reach. And as we continue to seek answers, one thought lingers. What caused the silence that followed that second? In the stillness of the cockpit, time is measured in seconds, but those seconds can feel like an eternity. The confusion in the voices that echoed in those fleeting moments tells a story, one of disbelief, panic, and human fragility. Why did he cut off? The words hang in the air, as if asking the very question no one could answer. He did not. The cockpit voice recorder captures this exchange, calm, almost too calm, given the gravity of the situation. But beneath those controlled voices, a storm is raging. A moment of psychological uncertainty, the overwhelming pressure of the unknown. What goes through a pilot's mind when control slips away, when the engines, the heart of the machine, fall silent beneath them? In the face of disaster, there is no manual, no preparation, only raw, human instinct. The uncertainty that filled the cockpit was not just technical, it was emotional, psychological. Denial, the refusal to accept what was unfolding. The refusal to believe that something so catastrophic could happen, despite all the training, all the experience. As reports surfaced about the mental health toll on pilots, the unseen weight of stress, pressure, and the burden of lives at stake becomes apparent. The emotional toll of a profession where uncertainty is constant, where lives rest on the edge of decisions made in split seconds. In those moments, did the pilots doubt themselves? Did they wonder, is this my fault? Or was it simply a tragedy they couldn't have predicted? We may never know what exactly went through their minds in those last moments, but the voices they left behind speak volumes. And in those voices, we hear not just the professionals, but the humans, the uncertainty, the confusion, the helplessness. The world watched, gripped by a mix of shock and speculation. Every piece of information, every rumor, was picked apart, dissected. But amidst the frenzy, one truth emerged. What the media was presenting didn't match the reality of the investigation. Jennifer Homendy, chair of the NTSB, publicly warned that much of the media coverage was premature. There was a rush to conclusions, a thirst for answers that, in the eyes of officials, hadn't yet been earned. "We must let the investigation run its course," she stated firmly. But how could anyone wait? The world demanded answers, and the silence from official bodies only fueled the fire of speculation. Airlines, unions, and aviation bodies were quick to push back, calling for a balanced, fact-based approach. IFALPA, the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations, condemned the reckless spread of misinformation. In their statement, they stressed the need for respect toward the victims and their families, warning that the rush to blame the pilots could have far-reaching consequences. The Economic Times, Reuters, and the Times of India all echoed concerns. Was the media's rush to judgment truly helpful? Or was it simply adding fuel to an already blazing fire? As the investigation continued behind closed doors, public opinion shifted with every new headline. The truth, it seemed, was being drowned out by noise. The industry's caution was clear, but the media frenzy had taken on a life of its own, and the questions lingered. Would the real cause of the crash ever be fully understood? Or would it remain buried beneath the weight of speculation and sensationalism? The answers were out there, but for now, the world could only wait. The shockwaves from the crash were not confined to the wreckage of Flight 171 alone. They rippled through the aviation industry, igniting a chain reaction that stretched far beyond the runway. The DGCA, India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, quickly launched an audit of the entire Boeing 787 fleet. This wasn't just a precaution, it was a deep dive into the very foundation of Boeing's operations. The aircraft, once hailed as a marvel of modern engineering, now faced the scrutiny of regulators across the globe. How many more were out there, flying under the radar of oversight? As the investigation unfolded, the implications grew. A judicial probe was swiftly requested, adding further pressure on Boeing and raising questions about the company's accountability. How far would this reach? The aviation community, already on edge, wondered, what would this mean for the future of the Dreamliner? The economic fallout was immediate. Boeing stock took a hit, its reputation bruised. The sleek image of the 787 Dreamliner, once a symbol of excellence, now carried the weight of a tragedy. Financial experts pondered, would this event tarnish Boeing's legacy for good? Analysts at Barron's and the Times of India noted the long-term damage to the company's market standing. Could Boeing recover, or would this mark the beginning of a downturn for the aviation giant? This wasn't just a commercial crisis, it was a geopolitical one. The reverberations of this event stretched beyond balance sheets, touching on national security, defense contracts, and the global competitive edge in aerospace. Aviation powerhouses across the world looked on, their own fleets of Boeing aircraft now facing heightened scrutiny. And in those quiet boardrooms, behind the data and the stock tickers, the true cost of this tragedy was being tallied. Lives lost, trust broken, and a corporation at the crossroads of its future. The ripple effects were far from over, and only time would reveal just how deep they would go. In the midst of the chaos, one truth remains. We are still waiting for the final report. The preliminary findings have painted a picture, but it's incomplete. Fragments of a story that won't be fully told for months, perhaps longer. The wreckage of Flight 171, the silent engines, the unanswered questions, they are all pieces of a puzzle we cannot yet solve. The investigation, still in its infancy, will take time. The truth, like a lighthouse in the fog, shines faintly ahead, its full clarity still far from reach. A year, maybe more, before we understand everything. But until then, the rumors will swirl, the speculation will grow, and the victims, those who perished, their families, will wait, just as we all are. What happened in those final moments? Who is accountable for the loss of life? These questions will not fade. They will remain, lingering in the air, as we wait for the final, definitive truth to emerge. In the end, the silence may be the hardest part to bear. The truth is out there, but we can only wait, patient, somber, unsure. Share your thoughts below. What do you think happened in those critical seconds? What was really going through the pilots' minds? Join the conversation as we continue to piece together the truth.